Hello there, Keith King here from AncientSymbolist.com. Today I would like to talk about the Ark of the Covenant and its connection with Freemasonry. The Ark of the Covenant is probably the most important object known to mankind. It was the reason why the temple was built in Jerusalem. But what has the temple and the Ark of the Covenant got to do with Freemasonry? Everything. The very essence of Freemasonry is about the building and completion of the temple built by King Solomon at Jerusalem for the sole purpose of housing the Ark of the Covenant. How do we know this? A journey through the Grand Lodge of England will reveal the importance of the Ark of the Covenant to Freemasonry. As a Freemason, I am constantly reminded that Freemasonry is not a secret society, but a society with secrets. To obtain these secrets, one has to know certain tokens or gestures and be able to recite certain words when called upon. Those words and gestures will not be revealed in this video. However, the legends and a particular story will be brought to light. In the Grand Lodge of England, inside the temple, is an image of the Ark of the Covenant. On one side is King Solomon, and on the other is Hiram, the architect and builder of the temple. The two tablets containing the Ten Commandments, the anchor of hope, the cross and the heart symbol are all placed upon Jacob's ladder and situated between the two Ionic pillars, representing the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud that brought the Israelites out of Egypt. Above this image on the ceiling is the story of why the temple was first built. It comes from the Old Testament, where God instructs David to build a house to permanently place the Ark of the Covenant. Prior to this, the Ark was being carried from village to village and housed inside the tabernacle. In return for building the temple and giving a home for the Ark, God promises David that his seed will rule over God's people forever. It is this verse that kings and queens have quoted over the centuries to maintain their monarchies.
I did not make myself king. God did. King by divine right. Now you come to me with this document, seeking to limit the authority given to me by God.
To make sure this verse never leaves the sight of the British people, it is placed on the ceiling of the Grand Lodge of England. Here is its wording, cut up into 4 sections. He shall build me a house, and I will establish his kingdom and throne forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. I will settle him in mine house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forevermore. Most of the kings of England have been the Grand Master of the English Freemasons, including Queen Elizabeth's father, King George VI. It goes back much further than this, to where King Charles I would go to a Freemasons' lodge with Sir Christopher Wren and Sir Isaac Newton. What would they have discussed in this Freemasons' lodge? The answer to this question is the relevance of the Ark of the Covenant and why it was called the Glory of Israel. There is a legend or story that is told within 2 of the degrees within Freemasonry. How do I know this? Well, I like to recite the portion of the lecture pertaining to the Ark of the Covenant within these 2 degrees. I explain to the new candidate what the Ark was made from, its actual dimensions and its purpose. I explained that the Ark is an oracle, and when asked a question, an answer was given. To King Charles I and Sir Christopher Wren, this must have sounded impossible. Today, we could just assume it incorporated a computer of some sort that had the ability to understand various languages and reply with the correct statement. This does not seem to overwhelm the candidate today, as within the lodge on display on this night is an exact replica made from wood of the Ark of the Covenant. He has already been shown this Ark of the Covenant on a previous occasion and told that King Solomon was extremely worried that the enemies of Israel might wish to overthrow the temple and steal the Ark. So King Solomon had the architect Hiram construct an exact copy of the original Ark of the Covenant. And in order to keep it safe from marauding armies, King Solomon had the architect Hiram build a secret vault under the Holy of Holies in the main temple above. This secret vault is displayed upon the Royal Arch tracing board. This second Ark of the Covenant was to reside within the secret vault forever. Only the High Priest of Israel was to know about this secret location, situated under the temple. The intrigue does not stop there. When King Solomon had finished building the temple, he wished to show its magnificence to the surrounding kingdoms. So he sent out requests to these kingdoms to come and view the temple. The highest ranking queen in the whole of Africa replied to King Solomon's request and brought fantastic gifts as presents to King Solomon. King Solomon was overwhelmed by the beauty of the Queen of Sheba and gave her a personal tour of the temple and also his palace. He then married the Queen of Sheba and had a boy with her. The boy's name would be Menelik, and he would later become the king of Ethiopia. After Menelik was born, the Queen of Sheba returned to Axum in Ethiopia to raise the child and to maintain her kingdom. Many years later, King Solomon died, and Menelik returned to Jerusalem to pay his respects to his father. Whilst in Jerusalem, Menelik learnt that 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel were unhappy with the amount of taxes that King Solomon had applied to the nation. The tribes asked King Solomon's eldest son, who had taken over the kingship, to please reduce the taxes they were asked to pay each year. King Solomon's son replied, "I will not reduce the taxes, but will now multiply the amount you must pay." With this, 10 of the 12 tribes renounced their affiliation to Israel and went their own way. With this knowledge, Menelik took one of the 2 arks back to Axum in Ethiopia, where he built his own temple to house the Ark of the Covenant. He then created his own priesthood, who were charged with keeping the Ark maintained. In order to complete this task, each of the priests was given a tuning fork. This tuning fork must have been preset at a certain frequency. Here is one of the priests outside the temple in Axum, Ethiopia, with the tuning fork in his hand. The temple in Axum, Ethiopia, sits just behind the church, which is aptly named St. Mary of Zion. I have since learnt that the church and the temple sit upon one of the earth's energy lines. Beside using the tuning fork to connect to the correct frequency for the ark, the high priest had 2 special keys or crystals. These were called the Umin and the Thurin. They were placed within a secret pocket. They were situated at the back of the high priest's breastplate. We can only surmise what these two crystals were made from at this point in time. What we can assume is that these two crystals were the keys to operating the Ark. Back to Jerusalem, where one of the two arks was still positioned. With 10 of the 12 tribes leaving the nation of Israel, it was left to the tribes of Judah and Benjamin to maintain the safety of the temple and the Ark. The nations surrounding Jerusalem became aware of Israel's demise and conspired to overthrow the temple. This was achieved when Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, captured Jerusalem. He destroyed the temple and took the Israelites into captivity for 70 years in Babylon. Just prior to the destruction of the temple, the priests made sure the only ark that remained in Jerusalem was well hidden in the secret vault of King Solomon. During their captivity in Babylon, the knowledge of the secret vault of Solomon was lost. Finally, after 70 years, a new king named Darius ruled over Babylon and Persia. This king had a dream about the temple in Jerusalem and became sympathetic to the Israelites and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. He also charged a certain prince called Zorro to rebuild the temple on the same location as Solomon's temple. So Zorro from Babel, or Zerubbabel, rebuilt the second temple in Jerusalem. Whilst Zerubbabel was building the second temple, his workmen discovered the secret vault, which housed the Ark of the Covenant. However, its location and the Ark of the Covenant was never revealed to the people of Israel again. This was because the remaining Israelites who returned to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple were too few in number and could not have stopped any surrounding nation from discovering its location and taking it for themselves. The Ark remained hidden under the temple in Jerusalem for another few hundred years, even while Herod, the governor of Jerusalem, extended both the temple and his palace. And then, in 70 AD, the people rose up in rebellion of the Roman occupation of Jerusalem. Unfortunately, the Israelites were all massacred and their temple was once again destroyed, and all the knowledge of the Ark of the Covenant appeared to be lost. And then, in 1099, a group of French noblemen managed to band together warriors from all over Europe and set out on a crusade to once again recapture Jerusalem. Once in Jerusalem, some of these noblemen set up camp in what was the old stables of King Solomon's palace. They had a specific task. This was to dig and search for this secret vault. Well, they must have found it, because within a short time they all returned to France and became the richest organisation in the world. This was because they discovered the original temple site of King Solomon. They became known as Temple Knights, or Knights Templars. How much of the original treasures stored by King Solomon was retrieved by the Knights Templars would never be known. However, what was brought back to France made them enormously wealthy, so much so that they would lend money to kings and business people, always placing an interest on the monies lent. This money lending led to their demise in Europe. The King of France, Philip the Fair, refused to pay back some of the monies he owed the Knights Templars, and on Friday the 13th of October, 1307, he outlawed the organisation and seized all of their estates in France. What the King of France was not aware of was that the head of the organisation of the Templars, whose name was Jacques de Molay, had got wind of the king's treasury and had shipped all of the Templar treasures on board their enormous fleet and set it south for a new continent known as the Americas. At this stage, we can only assume that on board this fleet was the Ark of the Covenant, their most prized possession. Over the coming years, the Knights Templars amalgamated into the Freemasons and created lodges all around the world, while still retaining the stories surrounding King Solomon's Temple and its most prized possession of the Ark of the Covenant. And then, in 1933, when Freemasons' Hall was completed in London, the story of why the temple was built was inscribed upon the ceiling, and the builder of the temple, King Solomon, and the builder of the second Ark of the Covenant, Hiram, the widow's son, were painted upon the walls for everyone to see. To understand the significance of the Ark, we must go back in history to see where the first Ark of the Covenant came into play, to a time when the Israelites were leaving their captivity in Egypt. In the book of Exodus, the Lord tells Moses to build the Ark using these special dimensions. 2.5 cubits shall be its length, and 1.5 cubits its width, and 1.5 cubits its height. A cubit is 21 inches. It shall be made of pure gold, with rings in each corner to carry it, so that wooden staves could be placed in these rings. It shall be made from acacia wood, and a mercy seat with 2 cherubims, made from gold, shall be placed on its top. A little later, in the book of Exodus, we learn that the Lord had given Bezalel, an Israelite, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, so that he could build the Ark of the Covenant. What was the purpose of the Ark? It appears to be a telephone device, in which the Lord could speak to Moses and other high priests. We get this assumption from the book of Leviticus. And the Lord spoke to Moses within the tabernacle, where the Ark was positioned. In the film Raiders of the Lost Ark, the archaeologist Belloc tells Indiana Jones that the Ark is a radio to God.
All in good time. And I'm finished. Jones, do you realize what the Ark is? It's a transmitter. It's a radio for speaking to God, and it's within my reach.
Did this Ark or radio get used? Well, in the story of Samuel, the Lord called to Samuel from out of the Ark of the Covenant and tells Samuel to explain to the high priest Eli events that are about to happen. This image of the young Samuel being presented to the high priest by his mother Hannah shows Samuel wearing the Grand Master's apron. It is placed within a Masonic church. Many years later, when Samuel is now the high priest and in charge of the Ark, the Lord tells him to make David the new king of Israel, which is where the story presented in the Grand Lodge of England comes in. Who or what was this Ark of the Covenant communicating with, and why? One particular story from the Bible would tell us why. It is the story of the walls of Jericho. Jericho was a massive city with walls of 14 foot, stones or concrete. It seemed impenetrable. The Israelites were told by their deity to walk around the city 7 times carrying the Ark, and then at the allotted time, the priests were to blow their trumpets, and then all of a sudden the walls came tumbling down. The Israelites rushed into Jericho ransacked the city and took all of its treasures back to the tabernacle, where the Lord's vehicle, called the cloud, was waiting. This cloud is mentioned on numerous occasions, mostly just before or just after the Israelites were going into war and enhancing its borders. This cloud would reside upon the tabernacle for days, seemingly taking the spoils of war from the Israelites after each battle it had won with its neighbours. At night time, the Israelites would see lights upon the vehicle. Here is an example from the book of Numbers. On that day that the tabernacle was reared up, the cloud covered the tabernacle, namely the tent of the testimony, and in the evening there was upon the tabernacle, as if it was the appearance of fire, continuing on until the morning. So it was always. The cloud covered it by day, and the appearance of fire by night. And when the cloud was taken up from the tabernacle, then the children of Israel journeyed, and in the place where the cloud abode, the children of Israel pitched their tents. At the commandment of the Lord, the Israelites started their journeys. And when the cloud stayed upon the journey for many days, then the Israelites stayed in their tents. It seemed on each occasion the Israelites journeyed, the cloud would be close by. As the Israelites overcame the surrounding nations and increased its borders, the cloud and whoever was in it would have been a powerful ally to have. The Bible calls this vehicle the cloud, as it appears to keep rising up and descending into the sky. It was God's own temple. Its size is explained in the book of Revelation. And he showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. And the angel measured the city, and it was 4 square and measured 144 cubits. A cubit is 21 inches. It was made from pure gold. Back to the story of David, who was told by his deity to build a permanent house for the ark to reside in, instead of the tabernacle. One day, David was moving the ark to Jerusalem in preparation for its permanent stay in the new temple. It was being carried on a cart drawn by oxen. As it went over a rock, it moved, and Uzzah put his hand upon the ark and was electrocuted. Does this mean that the ark was a type of electrical device? Well, the greatest explorer of all time, Erich von Däniken, seemed to think so, and explained his theory in his works, The Chariot of the Gods. He discovered that in 1961, a group of Minnesota college students constructed an ark according to the directions given in the Bible. Their instructor had to have the ark destroyed due to the high electrical charge it developed.
In 1961, a group of Minnesota college students took Moses seriously enough to construct an ark according to his directions. Their instructor, however, had to have the model destroyed because of the dangerously high electrical charge it developed.
In today's world, this electrical device could be used to produce free energy. I wonder if King Solomon knew about electricity. Solomon's real name was Jedediah, meaning beloved of God. The Egyptians had a symbol for Jed. It was the electrical insulator. It was always shown attached to the Egyptian light bulb. This light bulb allowed the Egyptians to create hieroglyphs and murals hundreds of meters underground where there was no light. There are thousands of these murals depicting the Egyptian light bulb displayed all over Egypt. Today, these insulators, or JEDs, allow our modern electrical grid system to operate, with knowing that there are 2 Ark of the Covenants built, one by Bezalel for Moses and one by Hiram for Solomon. Could there be another? Surely if Moses was talking to the Lord via his Ark, then the Lord would have also had his own Ark. Well, the last book in the Bible, the book of Revelations, tells us that the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the Ark of the Covenant. I'll just let that sink in for a while. Here's where I go out on a limb and make the statement: is one or both of these arks in our possession being used today to talk to someone out there in the universe? Well, it seems as if someone wants to make contact with us here on Earth. Why do I say this? In 2001, at the National Press Club of America, Dr. Stephen Greer allowed members of the press to interview various ex-United States servicemen who claimed to have seen UFOs and extraterrestrials. One of these servicemen was Sergeant Clifford Stone. Here is his story.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clifford Stone. I was a Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I had a secret clearance with nuclear surety. I could get the clearance that I needed to do whatever it was that was necessary for me to do at the time on special operations when I was called in on those. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. I'd like to go into detail on some of the cases, about the nuts and bolts cases right here, but I will be available if you have any questions concerning my involvement in this. You can talk to Dr. Greer to arrange for me to get to talk to you. But the whole situation is, we've sat back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects we know them to be of extraterrestrials. In 1969, I had an event that happened to me while I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. We went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. That would be my first exposure to any time that we would be recovering an unidentified flying object. When we went there, we already had people that was already in the facility. We were a backup team, which was supposed to be NBC because there was supposed to be some nuclear materials that was on board this craft. Later on, most people involved were to be told that there was nothing on board it. It was nothing more than just a crash of one of our aircraft. I know better because I was one of the people that approached it with a Geiger counter to get surface readings. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people.
Then someone from the press asked Sergeant Stone what they looked like. Here is his explanation.
Yes, sir. So I think my question is actually to Clifford Stone. You said that you had seen aliens on a craft that had crashed. I wonder if you could describe what they look like.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species. You have individuals that look very much like you and myself that could walk among us and you wouldn't even notice the difference, except for some of the things that they might be able to go ahead, even in a dark room, and touch an object and go ahead and identify what color that object might be. They would have a heightened sense of smell, sight, hearing, The situation is that you have various types of what we normally call grays. We didn't call them grays in the military, but you had at least 3 types of the grays. You had some that were much taller than we were. The unique thing that I'd like to point out for the most part is that the entities that we did catalog were in fact humanoid. Now this created a situation where the scientific community was trying to figure out why that would be the case, because you would expect that if life evolved on other planets, that they would take on some type of other being, so to speak, not necessarily look humanoid or be bipedal such as we are. But apparently we got quite a few of the species out there that are humanoid in appearance, and that creates a question that yet has to be answered by science.
His statement that most of the occupants in these craft were humanoid with special abilities seems to baffle the scientists tasked with discovering their identities. By now, you may be thinking, is he telling the truth? Well, what if I told you that Sergeant Stone worked for this President of the United States, whose name was Ronald Reagan, and that in 1987, Ronald Reagan went to the United Nations and gave the game away, telling the delegates that there may already be an alien force here on Earth.
President Reagan voices this interest during a speech at the United Nations in 1987.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Since that time in 1987, when the President of the United States goes on record to tell the world that he personally believes that we have aliens visiting Earth, nothing concrete has ever come out from governments. Instead, people have been ridiculed for even having these thoughts. But sooner or later, with the internet and mobile phones, someone is going to get a real live image and then send it over the airwaves before it can be shut down. In the meantime, for as long as the story of the Ark of the Covenant is displayed upon the walls and the ceiling of the Grand Lodge of England, there will always be the inquisitive Freemason searching for the truth. If you have arrived this far and have enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, ancientsymbolist.com.